The morning of February 20th, 1965, began with the pale light of Canberra's early summer sky filtering over the airfield. The tarmac shimmered under a thin veil of mist, engines of parked aircraft idling softly in the distance. The Lockheed L-188 Electra sat poised, its polished aluminum skin catching the diffused sunlight, a symbol of modern turboprop aviation, sleek yet imposing. Inside the cockpit, the flight crew moved with practiced precision. Switches clicked, instruments hummed, and the scent of warm metal and oil hung in the air. The captain ran through the pre-flight checklist, the co-pilot scanning dials, while the flight engineer monitored engine pressures. Every motion was deliberate, every sound catalogued. Outside, the runway stretched like a taut ribbon of concrete, flanked by low winds that hinted at calm conditions, but the morning was deceptive. From a control tower, air traffic controllers observed the Electra with professional detachment, logging its expected departure and tracking the steady rise of the sun. Maintenance crews completed final inspections, unaware that this routine morning would soon turn into a pivotal chapter in Australian aviation history. The Electra's 4 turboprop engines, innovative yet demanding, awaited ignition, each turbine a finely balanced system of power and vulnerability. As the aircraft began taxiing, a subtle tension filled the air, a tension invisible, but palpable to those attuned to machines and flight. The Electra accelerated along the runway, the engine singing a high-pitched whine, propellers slicing the early light. In those critical seconds, countless mechanical and human elements aligned perfectly, or would soon misalign. The camera would linger on the gleam of polished aluminum, the precise movement of levers, the sweep of cockpit gauges. Silence punctuates the scene more than sound. The wind over the tarmac, the faint murmur of distant traffic, the slow rotation of propellers. Each element signals the beginning of a journey that will demand scrutiny, understanding, and reflection. The Electra lifted, nose climbing, wings slicing the low morning clouds, and for a fleeting moment, the aircraft floated between promise and peril, the boundary of normal flight and tragedy unspoken yet imminent. In the mid-1960s, Australia's domestic aviation network was expanding rapidly. Air travel was no longer a novelty. It had become a vital link between cities, remote towns, and strategic regional centers. Canberra, as the nation's capital, occupied a central position in this network, politically, economically, and symbolically. The skies were busier, yet safety oversight and aircraft technology was still evolving. The Lockheed L-188 Electra represented the forefront of turboprop innovation. Introduced in the late 1950s, it promised the speed of a jet with the efficiency of a propeller-driven airliner. Airlines adopted the Electra with optimism, impressed by its range, payload capacity, and advanced avionics for the era. Yet, early operational experience revealed challenges, vibration issues, engine torque sensitivities, and complex maintenance requirements. Every takeoff and landing demanded precise crew coordination and technical knowledge. For the Canberra air disaster, these factors framed the context of risk. The airline operating the Electra maintained a fleet that had integrated the new turboprop technology, but like many carriers of the period, it balanced ambition with limited experience. Maintenance protocols, while rigorous, sometimes encountered gaps between manufacturer recommendations and practical operational realities. Aviation culture in Australia prioritized reliability, but crews often worked at the edge of procedural knowledge, relying heavily on training and instinct in moments of unexpected system behavior. Environmental factors also shaped the flight. Canberra's terrain is a subtle mix of rolling hills and variable weather patterns. Fog and low cloud were common, particularly in early mornings. While meteorological data suggested safe conditions on February 20th, atmospheric nuances, temperature inversions, subtle wind shear, or low-level turbulence could challenge even experienced crews. Pilots had to interpret instruments accurately, anticipate environmental shifts, and execute procedures without error. Finally, the human element cannot be overstated. Crews were highly trained yet human. Fatigue, prior flight experience, familiarity with the Electra, and coordination under pressure all contributed to the operational landscape. Safety was not merely a function of machines or regulations. It was a sum of people, technology, and environment interacting in complex ways. The Canberra air disaster will be shaped by precisely this intersection. The Lockheed L-188 Electra was a technological marvel of its time, a four-engine turboprop with swept wings, pressurized fuselage, and a performance envelope bridging propeller efficiency with knee jet speeds. Its engines, the Allison 501D13 turboprops, were powerful but demanding. Each required careful throttle management. Torque asymmetry could induce yaw and roll if mismanaged. Early in its operational life, Electras were prone to vibrations, particularly at high power settings, which engineers traced in nacelle resonance and propeller aerodynamics. These characteristics were not always fully understood in operational settings, creating latent risk. The crew aboard the Canberra flight were experienced yet human. The captain had accumulated thousands of flight hours, including time on earlier piston airliners and initial Electra operations. His co-pilot had trained under similar conditions, competent but relatively less familiar with the idiosyncrasies of turboprop handling. The flight engineer monitored engine parameters and systems, providing crucial feedback during high-stress moments. Crew resource management, as formally recognized today, was still evolving. Communication and coordination depended on individual experience, training habits, and adherence to procedural checklists. Environmental factors compounded operational complexity. Canberra's topography was a mix of rolling hills and subtle valleys, capable of producing wind shears and turbulence at low altitudes. On February 20th, early morning fog lay over the airfield, reducing visual references. The runway was adequate but narrow by modern standards, and the surrounding terrain demanded precise climb performance immediately after takeoff. Subtle variations in temperature and wind could amplify the Electra's vibration tendencies and engine sensitivity, placing additional cognitive and manual load on the crew. The aircraft systems themselves were sophisticated but not forgiving. The Electra's hydraulic systems powered flight controls, brakes, and gear. Electrical systems governed navigation and instrumentation. Engines had torque and temperature limits, and the propellers required careful synchronization. Any deviation from expected parameters, mechanical, electrical, or human, could cascade quickly. In combination with aerodynamic sensitivities and environmental nuances, a minor anomaly could escalate into a critical failure sequence within seconds. Viewed together, the aircraft, crew, environment, and systems formed an interdependent matrix. The Electra's design, the crew's experience, the subtle environmental forces, and the operational pressures coexisted in a delicate equilibrium. It was a system poised for efficiency and performance, yet inherently sensitive to error chains. The Canberra air disaster would unfold at the intersection of these factors, each amplifying the consequences of the other. The takeoff roll had begun under the deceptive calm of Canberra's early morning light. The Electra's four turboprop engines hummed in synchrony, the vibrations subtle but perceptible to trained ears. As the aircraft accelerated, the first signs of abnormality appeared. Not dramatic, not visible to anyone outside, but recorded in the precise telemetry of dials and engine instruments. A slight asymmetry in engine torque emerged, a quiver in the left nacelle, a minute fluctuation in propeller pitch. The captain maintained a steady hand on the yoke, instinctively adjusting for minor yaw. The co-pilot monitored engine pressures, noting the deviations but assessing them within operational tolerance. Seconds later, The left inner engine exhibited a rapid surge in torque, out of phase with the others. The aircraft responded immediately. The nose yawed left, a subtle banking tendency developed, and vibration intensified through the fuselage. The crew engaged corrective procedures, advancing the right engine, reducing power on the affected unit, and cross-checking instruments. In the cockpit, tension rose silently. The flight engineer reported fluctuating oil pressure and increasing temperature in the left engine. Aerodynamic forces, magnified by the aircraft's acceleration and low altitude, compounded the instability. The Electra was sensitive to torque imbalances. The aircraft's swept wings and high-mounted engines amplified the rolling tendency. Within 30 seconds of liftoff, the small deviation became critical. At approximately 150 feet above ground level, the left wing dipped noticeably. The captain applied corrective aileron and rudder inputs, but the engine's unpredictable response and aerodynamic vibration reduced control authority. The aircraft's roll and yaw oscillated, propeller blades slicing the air in a desperate attempt to stabilize lift. Any delay in input, any slight overcorrection, threatened to exceed the Electra's aerodynamic limits. The crew executed emergency procedures, feathering the affected propeller, adjusting power on the remaining engines, and attempting to climb out of ground effect. The plane responded sluggishly. Asymmetrical thrust, low altitude, and residual vibration created a margin for error too narrow to recover fully. In this compressed time frame, mechanical failure, human reaction, and environmental nuance converged. The Electra's descent, though rapid, was controlled in the sense that the crew maintained all possible procedures. No panic erupted, only professional engagement with failing systems. The aircraft struck terrain with extreme force, yet the crash was the culmination of misaligned systems, mechanical instability, and constrained decision space. The seconds of escalation that began with a subtle torque fluctuation became irrevocable, illustrating the unforgiving chain of cause and effect in early turboprop operations. Silence fell over the airfield in the immediate moments after the Electra came to rest. Emergency crews arrived swiftly, though the priority was not spectacle but methodical assessment, securing the site, documenting positions, and preserving evidence. The aircraft was a tangle of twisted metal and displaced components, yet each piece told a story to trained investigators. Every engine, every control surface, every instrument became a clue in understanding what had unfolded in those critical seconds. The Australian aviation authorities initiated a full investigation, enlisting engineers, pilots, and technical experts. Their work was painstaking, reconstructing the sequence of mechanical events, reviewing maintenance logs, and interviewing crew members from other flights to assess operational norms. The investigation revealed that a combination of mechanical resonance, torque asymmetry in the left inner engine, and procedural limitations had contributed to the loss of control. Maintenance practices, though largely compliant, had not fully accounted for the Electra's early operational idiosyncrasies. Witnesses and media coverage chronicled the disaster with restraint. Reports emphasized the professionalism of the crew and the unprecedented challenge of managing a new turboprop aircraft under subtle but dangerous mechanical stress. There were no sensationalized images, no dramatized narratives, only accounts of a flight that had exceeded the safe margins of its systems and human operators. Operational consequences followed quickly. The airline reviewed fleet-wide maintenance practices, reinforced pilot training on the Electra-specific behaviors, and adjusted operational limits to account for the early engine quirks. Regulators updated oversight procedures, ensuring that vibration monitoring, torque asymmetry warnings, and system redundancies were better understood and enforced. Lessons learned from Canberra informed broader turboprop operations in Australia, highlighting the importance of technical understanding and crew coordination in preventing future incidents. The Canberra air disaster, though tragic, catalyzed a shift in aviation culture. It underscored the necessity of rigorous technical comprehension, proactive maintenance, and standardized procedures for new aircraft types. The event became a case study in how mechanical subtlety, human response, and environmental conditions can converge, demanding careful analysis rather than conjecture. Its legacy was embedded not in dramatized storytelling, but in measurable improvements to aircraft safety, operational training, and investigative methodology. The Canberra air disaster left a quiet but enduring imprint on Australian aviation. Beyond the immediate tragedy, the lessons it offered were structural, procedural, and cultural. Airlines revisited the integration of new aircraft types, recognizing that early operational experience could reveal vulnerabilities not apparent in manufacturer testing or initial pilot manuals. The Electra's torque sensitivity and vibration tendencies became central to revised training curricula, ensuring that future crews would approach similar situations with knowledge and foresight rather than instinct alone. Regulatory authorities codified stricter maintenance protocols, emphasizing predictive inspections and real-time monitoring of critical engine parameters. Flight manuals were updated with detailed procedures for asymmetrical power management, emergency engine shutdowns, and control inputs during vibration anomalies. These changes were subtle, incremental, yet profoundly effective, steps that would prevent similar accidents in subsequent years. Culturally, the disaster reinforced the importance of crew coordination, methodical procedure, and respect for technological limits. Aviation training increasingly highlighted human-machine interaction, situational awareness, and error chain recognition. Safety was no longer solely about individual skill or mechanical reliability. It became about the orchestration of both in environments where milliseconds could determine outcomes. The Electra itself continued to serve, its reputation tempered by operational experience and improved understanding. Modifications, procedural updates, and meticulous oversight allowed the aircraft to operate safely across Australia and internationally. The Canberra air disaster became a pivotal case study, a reminder that aviation progress carries inherent risk, but risk can be managed through analysis, training, and continuous improvement. Ultimately, the story of February 20th, 1965, is not only about loss, but about reflection, learning, and transformation. The tragedy prompted a measured recalibration of standards, a tightening of procedures, and a deepened respect for the interplay of machine, crew, and environment. It concluded not with spectacle, but with knowledge, quietly shaping a safer future.